there's just a whole world of other foods out there. And the thing is that, you know, one of the truths is that food crosses culture, country borders, religious borders. It brings people together who have a shared history they may or may not know about. And buñuelos is one of the perfect examples of a food like that. So we're going to talk about it tonight. And we're going to explore it from the perspective of buñuelos, because almost every culture, cuisine in the world has fried food, and especially fried bread. From early Native Americans on through, we have fried food. So it's very interesting that we have it in common. Now in the Sephardic world, and often in other Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cultures, you have some sort of syrup that's put on it, or a sauce, like a syrup made from sugar and honey. We'll talk about that too. But, you know, buñuelos is just so emblematic of this. And it's perfect for Hanukkah, not only because it's fried in oil, but because the name itself has not quite as many variations as Hanukkah, but quite a few. So you might find it being called B-U, Bimuelos. You might find it being called B-U-R, B-I-R. Oh, and also Buñuelos, B-U with an N-Y next in Spanish, so it's Buñuelos. And there's even more. So they're all from the same root food, so to speak. And also, buñuelos are eaten at Passover by Sephardim. And it's usually buñuelos de matzah. And that is made from usually either whole sheets of matzah that are soaked in milk or water, squeezed out and made into, again, a fritter. Or they can be made from matzah meal, because really a matzah meal pancake is a sort of a buñuelo in its own kind of right. There's also another way that some of them are made with yeast. We're not doing the yeast one tonight, but some are made with yeast. Some are baked in a special pan. I don't know if any of you have seen online. Sometimes you might see a pan with these kind of round half indents. And that's another way. You put oil, you bake, you can like bake them. It's a different way of doing it. And they turned out sort of like a rounded muffin as opposed to the fried fritter we're doing tonight. What we're doing tonight, this buñuelo is kind of like a really good cake donut. So it doesn't have that poofy yeasty, but it expands and it has that a little bit more substance to it. Now, many different variations of fried dough really demonstrate the influence of buñuelos in food history in general, and definitely in the history of Sephardic Jews. So we think that buñuelos probably started in Andalus, or as it's known now, Andalusia, which is in the southern part of Spain, and it includes Seville and Granada. Now, why is that important? Well, first, there were thriving Jewish communities all over Andalus, as it was called, or Al-Andalus, as the Moors called it. And that included Granada, which was a larger Jewish community and had several synagogues, you know, kosher butchers, etc., schools, Jewish schools there. And it was one of the last places that Jews were able to flee within Spain during the Reconquista, the reconquering of Spain by the Christians that led to the expulsion. And as you know, the Inquisition expanded as parts of Spain, starting from the north, moving south, were conquered again by by Isabel and Ferdinand, until finally in 1492, that infamous year, Granada fell, and the Inquisition came to all of Spain at that point. And not all and it's a very interesting history, because everyone thinks, oh, the Jews left. 1492, they left. They didn't all leave. And also the Inquisition went on for almost 100 years before. There were pogroms. There were, a couple thousand people killed in 1391 or 92 in Toledo. The Jewish quarter was burned quite a bit. There were a lot of things that were happening for 100 years as the Christians took over Spain again. And it was to push out the Jews, number one, and the Muslims, number two. And the Muslims didn't really have to leave until the 1500s. There was a little different situation. They weren't quite as hated as the Jews. And when they left, or before they left, let me back up because there's a couple terms to know. Many of them in the 15th and 16th century, there are a couple of kinds of Jews. Some people stayed Jewish and hid. They didn't convert. But many converted. They're called conversos. People are used to using the word marrano, which means pig, and that is really a derogatory term. We no longer use it. And it's a converso. And then many of these became crypto Jews or secret Jews, maintaining some of the Jewish culture and especially the food in secret and the religious practices too, to some extent. When they left for the Ottoman Empire, and they left over the course of a few hundred years, wasn't like 1492. They started leaving earlier in the 1400s, and they kept leaving through the 1600s. So as they left, they were able to basically take almost nothing. They could take religious practices. Some communities were able to take Torahs, and they took their food, their cuisine. And it's just amazing the more we find out constantly of how much influence the food of the Jews of Spain had on other parts of Europe and the New World, the Americas. So for instance, pumpkin, which we're using tonight, and there's a great story of the secret or the secret Sephardic history of pumpkins that Emily Pastor, another person from Hazon, wrote. It's a wonderful story, and you can read it, but the pumpkin was like the tomato. It came back from the Americas in basically the 1520s. It was an early imported crop. And because it came with conquistadors, because Spain sponsored many of these trips, Spain was one of the landing places where pumpkin and tomato came in. Well, most people, most Europeans and the Spanish were like, no. They thought tomatoes were poisonous. They fed pumpkins, they grew pumpkins and fed them to their animals. But the Sephardim, the Jews, whether they were secret Jews or not, I really loved these foods, and with good reason. So as these Jews moved across Europe, and especially to the Ottoman Empire, they brought their love of and their knowledge of these new crops with them. So that if, for instance, in the Sephardic Empire, you marry Jewish cuisine and Ottoman cuisine, and you come up with this incredible cuisine. And so like they got the tomatoes. Ottomans loved tomatoes, and it became a real part of Ottoman cuisine. They got it from the Sephardim. Okay, now, they also went to the New World. And so you have, throughout Latin America, you have Buñuelos. That's where that comes from, B-U-N-U-E-L-S. B-U-N-U-E-L-O-S, Buñuelos. And they're called Buñuelos all throughout Latin America, except in Mexico, where they're called sopapillas. Both of these dough treats are descended from conversos and crypto Jews, which is really interesting when you think about it. And there are many other food traditions throughout Latin America as well, but this specifically we're talking about tonight. Now, it's really fun to talk about the names for the fried dough that especially Jews eat or Jews eat especially at Hanukkah. Goes by different names in different countries, and it's really fun. So many places drop spoonfuls of dough in hot oil to create fritters, such as in Lebanon, where the Sephardic buñuelos became awame, which literally means to float, which in this case is in oil. In Morocco, balls of dough are pulled into kind of a donut shape and thin circles, and they're called spenge. And I have friends who grew up eating spenge also for breakfast. The mom would get up really early and make these incredible fried, mostly with powdered sugar all over them. You know, and then we can talk about beignets another time, but you know, there's a connection. Other places, it's so fun. The dough or the batter is squeezed into the hot oil in concentric circles. Now, what is that? Funnel cakes at county fairs. So it's just, fascinating history. There's also some very interesting word connections. For instance, in India, they're called jalebi. The Syrian Jews, that's with a J, okay. The Syrian Jews make zalebi, or zalebia, zalebia, with a Z and an H at the end. The Persian Jews change the A's to O's, and it becomes zolubia, Z-O-L-O-O, okay, B-I-A-H. In Iraq, zangula. They're all kind of similar. You can, you get the sense of how similar they are. You're seeing my notes. I just realized if anyone can read upside down, you can read ahead.
I was worried that you're gonna fry your notes.
This isn't hot yet. Not hot yet. So, and also in many of these countries I just named, you will find that there's a honey or honey sugar syrup that's made with either orange blossom water or rose water to flavor it, because that's very typical of those places. Now, in Turkey, they were called loka, and that translated to lokomades in Greece. So those are related. And they're like small, but they're small generally. Some of the fritters can be big, some are small. The lokomades are small balls of dough, very round usually, and they're soaked in a honey syrup also. And finally, we have the Italian Jews. So the Italian Jews serve an anise flavored frittelle di Hanukkah. And these are also with a honey syrup, sometimes flavored with orange blossom water. So, but they have the anise in there, which is so interesting how every culture will add their flavor to this particular dish. Now, in the Sephardic tradition, this is really like, if you need permission to eat Bimuelos, here it is. So, in Ladino Torahs, there are versions of the Torah written in Ladino. Bimuelos are described in two places, one in Exodus, one in Numbers, as being like manna, okay? So we received manna from heaven in the desert, and it was interpreted or translated in Ladino Torahs as manna. So fried food held to a higher authority. I think we need to make some manna now. So I'm going to turn on the, whoops. Okay, I'm turning my burner on to about medium. If I wanted it to be faster, I would do it higher, but I'm going to be cooking for a little bit. Now, what I have in this bowl is a cup of flour, all-purpose flour. You can make this gluten-free. Use 1 for 1. I've tried it with other, chickpea and other things. The 1 for 1 works best. So 1 for 1 flour or all-purpose flour. I'm using all-purpose. I have a couple pinches of salt in here to balance the spices. And this, by the way, is such an easy one-bowl recipe that you're all going to want to make it, because you can make a lot of these for a crowd. And also, if you look at the recipe near the end, it will tell you you can keep them warm in the oven at about 200 on something like, I like draining on this, which I can talk about now, I guess. But see, I have my cooling racks on top of some brown paper. I could put it on top of paper towel. I kind of hate to waste the paper towel. So, but if you're going to drain them on something like a baking sheet or a plate covered in paper towel, you need several layers of paper towel, because the last thing you want is not to have enough layers. And so they're basically sitting in oil anyway, as they're supposed to be, the oil is supposed to be being absorbed out of them. So if you do it this way, one of the advantages is you can put them in the oven at 200 for up to 30 minutes. And you could probably stretch that if you needed to. So you can make them ahead, which is really nice for a fried anything. Okay, so these will nearly double in size when we fry. There's baking powder, which I'm going to add now. There's a teaspoon. Okay. And then there is, I'm going to add, wait, let me get on the right page so I'm not just using my memory. Okay. And then what I'm also going to add is 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and that's what's going to help them poof up a little bit. And then we have a tablespoon of sugar. All right, and I'm just using a little whisk to blend dry ingredients. It's such an easy way to do it. And 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. Okay. I have to laugh. This is a secret I'm going to tell you now. See these little glass cups? Aren't they so perfect for this? They come off of a Seder plate. There's a whole thing on a Seder plate that I got years ago, and I realized how wonderful they were for cooking classes. So,
but you can also buy those like those little glass bowls. We bought them at like a restaurant supply store.
Yes.
But I love that they came from your Seder plate, Susan. That's so cute.
But you can also buy them like even on Amazon if anybody wants to get little glass cups. Yeah, I know. It's a beautiful Seder plate, and you stick these on there. Anyway, obviously I don't change dishes for Passover. All right, so then I'm adding a half a teaspoon of coriander and a quarter teaspoon of allspice. Now, the spices in this are a little different from what you might find in other recipes for buñuelos. Part of it is because I'm going to be adding pumpkin, and I love these warm spices with pumpkin, and it's like part of the season. But the other thing is that for me, it marries the cardamom and allspice that is so popular in Syrian cooking with the cinnamon of like Greek, Turkish food. And I love that it brings these different kind of food tastes together because they blend so well. All right, so I just want to really blend this really well. By the way, you need to be sure to make this your own. So like, for instance, you don't like allspice, even though here you really hardly taste it, don't use it. Or you don't have it, don't worry. You can add a little bit more. You can leave a spice out. You can, use less of it. You really want to make recipes your own. So I'm definitely all for that. Okay. And now what I've done here, okay, is I have 2 eggs that are beaten. And one of the things you want to do when you're baking or working with eggs is bring them to room temperature, because room temperature eggs beat up so much better. They blend better, they cook better, they blend with other food better. So that's why if you ever see on recipes, bring your eggs to room temperature, that's why. If you need to, you can put them in warm water to speed up that process, because it really does make a nice difference. So what I'm going to do is just dump that in. All right, they're well beaten eggs. And then I'm going to add in my cup. Whoops. Yes, even chefs do things like that. I'm going to add in my cup of pumpkin puree. Now, a couple things. You can make your own pumpkin puree, perfectly fine. You can use squash puree, perfectly fine. And in fact, what is called pumpkin puree in cans at the supermarket is actually squash puree, because pumpkin does not hold up well and can't be preserved as well. Just a little secret. So, all right. Now I'm just going to blend this. It's going to become my batter. Okay. And I got to get out of using a whisk and move to my wooden spoon. I love a wooden spoon or a wooden spatula. A wooden spatula was Julia Child's favorite kitchen implement for a good reason. But a wooden spoon works too. And you just want to get everything in there. And one of the reasons why the spoon or the spatula is good, because there's so much flat surface for stirring. So you're really moving things around. You don't want to over mix this. You want everything blended, but not over mixed. Okay, so how do we know if, right, we're just going until it's smooth and blended. We're there. Now the question is, how do we know if the oil is ready? If you have a thermometer, which actually I did until yesterday when it stopped working, you can get your oil to 325, 330, that neighborhood. If you don't, you can either splash a couple drops of water, or what I sometimes do is I will take like a little teeny bit of dough and just, first of all, I hold my hand. Okay, I can feel heat. So that's your first hint. Then to see if it's hot enough, what happens when I drop this dough in? And you can see, perfect. Did you see how it rose right away and the bubbles all around it? Let's get busy. All right. So you don't want to crowd the pan. So we'll drop, and I don't like them huge. So I tend to do about something like this. Okay, you can do it in that also. So, and they're not supposed to be perfect, ladies and gentlemen. They're supposed to be a bit free form. So if you want to make them really round, you can. I love them being free form. Part of why I love them being free form is, for one thing, you get all these extra crispy crags, and you get like extra crispy little bits off the side. You also get places where extra syrup hides, and I like that too. So I really enjoy making them freeform. How much oil am I using? Just to let you know, for a 12-inch pan, which is what this is, woo, that's a really different one. A 12-inch pan, it's about 3 cups, 2.5 to 3 cups to get it to about 1/2 inch of oil. When you cook latkes, you're usually looking at 1/4 inch of oil, okay? But I am doing, you're doing a little bit more, kind of a cross between that and a deep fry, okay? So while we're waiting to turn, as these are cooking up, Shannon, are there any burning questions at the moment?
We did have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One was, so somebody was asking if you could use baking soda. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the difference between baking powder and baking soda. And then someone else wanted to know about using self-rising flour in this recipe, and if you could use it and how.
So self-rising flour has baking powder or baking soda? Because they do act differently. And to be honest, Shannon, you're like such an amazing baker that you probably even know the ins and out of that better, but they react differently. Baking soda will not work in this recipe.
So baking powder is a leavening agent, and it's going to give you lift. So what Susan was sharing before is that there are versions that have yeast in it. A sufganiyot, right, like has yeast in it, so it has that big rise. So you can't replace baking powder with baking soda. And then in regards to the question about self-rising flour, I don't know, but if a recipe calls for all-purpose flour, I use all-purpose flour. So that would be my answer, is that there's a reason for using flour, and self-rising flour has its time and place. I don't know what that is, but if there's recipe calls for all-purpose flour, let's use all-purpose flour. That would be my answer.
Right, because also you don't know what the leavening agent, you can find out what the leavening agent is, but you don't know how much. So unless you do some research, and maybe you can find it out, you know, is it the equivalent of, 2 teaspoons of baking powder in 1 cup of flour is more than the usual. And if you look, you can see that these are really starting to puff up. As a matter of fact, I made them a little bigger than usual. Oh, I want to show you, I got to start turning. Oh my goodness. I want to show you, if you notice, I am turning with chopsticks. Wooden chopsticks, not plastic. All right, why? They are so perfect. They're the most perfect thing for turning fried food. If you use tongs, you would probably squish these. You could try them, but they often will squish. The other thing is that if you use a spatula, you will flip and splash yourself with hot oil. Do not use a spatula. If you don't have tongs, if you don't have chopsticks, use these. And by the way, these are from takeout, so I saved them, and they work perfectly for cooking and for holding up plants. So, but if you don't have them, then I suggest that you use tongs. And hang on a sec. The kind of tongs.
I was gonna say if you don't have chopsticks, then I think you should order some Chinese.
There you go. That's perfect. Think ahead. And if you haven't done that, these actually are good because there's no teeth to dig in, and they're a bigger flat surface. So if I'm careful and spread them a little, I actually can gently lift them. Okay.
We did have a couple other questions I would throw at you, Susan, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I'm just going to be frying away here.
I really have to make these. I have to. They
look
so good.
You know what's really great about these, and you can smell it right now as they're cooking, is that there's spices in them. So it's not just that it's fried food. It's fried food with flavor. If that makes sense.
So that was actually, that leads into one of, there are two questions. One is that do you need to be concerned at all with respect to the frying oil? And I assume Daphne means the kind of oil with yes, respect to the flavor of the bimuelos. The second question, maybe you could just talk a little bit about keeping them in the oven and like the length of time and what will happen if you keep them in too long.
Well, if you have to cook these, they get fairly dark, and it's deceptive because there's pumpkin in here. So you don't want them to look burned, but they're not going to be that light golden brown that other ones without something like pumpkin have. So what happens in the oven if they're kept in too long is they will actually just kind of turn too dark, and they actually not so much. It takes a while for them to change in texture enough that they're not nice. So if you're going to keep them in for longer than about a half hour or 45 minutes, which is 200, that's fine. You could actually turn it down to 175, 200 is not very high. So you really are okay for most of the time. The thing you have to be careful of is that these really cook. Like what I was saying is don't be fooled by the color. They need the time. And you had another question. I just forgot. This one is more than done. Let me move this closer.
The question was about the type of oil that you use.
So I'm using a sunflower oil today. My favorites for frying are avocado oil, which is expensive, but it's a very healthy oil, and it has one of the highest smoke points. So it can be used over 500 degrees. So, and if you don't, use another neutral oil. What I don't use at all in my kitchen is canola oil. There's lots of reasons I don't use it, but one of the things is that when you fry with some oils, they get, I'm just gonna get these in here. They get, they release kind of bad fats from the oil that might not exist when they're not being used at high heat. And talking about high heat, this is getting too hot. If that happens to you, then just turn it down a little bit. But so I use sunflower, safflower, avocado, peanut oil, if you don't mind that taste and there aren't peanut allergies. Do not use olive oil. It will change the taste. But that's about, any good vegetable oil like that. Grapeseed works. And actually trying to, I wrote that it makes I think 12 to 14, but I made the first one a little big. What I get? 2, 4, 6, 7. Oh, I am going to get it. Okay. All right. Are there other questions? Nope. Shannon, nothing else
No,
now?
somebody was asking specifically about grapeseed oil, so you anticipated it.
It's another good one.
Okay, so another question from Charlotte, very specific, is that what would you do if you were making them and bringing them to somebody's house?
Ah, which of course is a good thing. You know what? I would slightly undercook them, just slightly. Hang on one second. Just get that out of the way. I would very slightly undercook them. And then, so like not as dark as these are. Okay, you can see these are pretty dark. And then I would heat them up at 200 or 175 during the meal for like even up to an hour in that case, if you've undercooked them just slightly. And I'll break one of these open. I just want to keep an eye on these. No, tongs are so much better. Yeah, I got it. This oil is really hot. And if your oil is too hot, it cooks the outside.
All right. Well, it's not a Jewish cooking class until somebody asks, can you freeze it?
I am such a huge proponent of freezing. Fried foods, other than latkes, and even in some cases latkes, don't freeze that well. The truth is, these deflate a bit. They're not bad. You could. I'm going to say, if you're desperate, you could freeze them. I would put them into a hard container. I wouldn't stack them. And I would carefully, you can put them in and keep them. I wouldn't do it for more than like a week or two at the most. Oh, hello. I think he wins the youngest participant award. I see that he cooks with you in the kitchen, Shannon.
Do you want to say hi? No, he does. He loves to cook. He does. He likes to mix. I love having the kids in the kitchen. He does
like chicken soup.
Do you like chicken soup? Well, his favorite food is meatballs. So.
Oh, albóndigas. I love it.
Exactly.
All right, so I want to show you all what the inside looks like. You can see that wait, I'm going to do it up here. You can see that, they're steamy and cakey, but they're loose, they're airy, they've got a certain airiness, and they're cooked through, and I have to watch this. When you get something like this situation, where there's something that's not as cooked, just turn it on its side. Help it cook a little bit. That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. All right. So yeah, the freezing, I'm not fond of doing it with these. You can do it if you're desperate. And I love my freezer. So any other questions? And before we go any further.
Okay, we did have a couple questions about sort of serving them. So would you insert jelly into these after they're all cooking, and instead of honey, would you put powdered sugar on top?
I'm going to show you a couple things I do with them. I would not put jelly in these. You need that, what you were saying, Shannon, about the sufganiyot, having that yeast. There's more air, more space in that. I don't know where, you're going to add jelly into this. And it's not a yeast dough, so it doesn't work so well. But you can serve it, you can make like, when you make baklava, and there's that lovely honey, sugar, lemon, maybe rose water, maybe the orange blossom water. You can do that with these. Yeah, all right. Oops. I'm losing my nap with my chopsticks. What I've done with these, honestly, is I have made them and left them out because I've made them well before guests arrive. And this is what I'm planning on doing this week, too, on Sunday. Well before guests arrive. And leave them out like this. If you leave them on the paper towel, you're going to get soggy buñuelos. That's one of the reasons I really like draining them this way. And you can see that there's oil that drains off, okay? One of the things that saves these in terms of keeping them in the oven is that they are fried in a good amount of oil. And that helps to keep them, the texture and the crispiness going. So I'm going to divide up this plate. Trade places. Is there any other questions?
Someone asked if you can reuse the oil or do you need to discard it?
You know, that's such an, that's a question I ask myself all the time. If I were making something tomorrow, I would reuse this oil, but probably not past that.
Another great, I love this question. Sorry, I think I saw it earlier and I missed it. I'm so sorry. Can you use an ice cream scoop to shape these?
Yes. If you want the nice, pretty round ones, yes.
Okay.
Look at all these beautiful freeform crabs and crispy, whatever you like.
Somebody wants to know if you made these for the Obamas.
No, because I was doing Passover. And that's a whole other story because the first year I didn't make much. Michelle Obama wanted a guest chef to come in and help green up what was strictly Ashkenazic, you know, I think they had sweet potatoes, and carrots were the vegetables. And so I came, and brisket and salmon. So I made chicken with preserved lemons and olives the first year and helped with matzo balls. The second and third years, I got to have influence on the menu. And so we did have Sephardic food on the menu, which was so much fun. And I added some salads. But the Sephardic food, if you look at any pictures from 2015 or 16 of the Seder, you see that there's on everybody's individual Seder plate, there's a brown egg. That's a huevo haminado. They wouldn't let me peel them so that they're a whole hard-boiled egg, but they're cooked really, really long. The huevos haminados are, you know, cooked for 6 to 8 hours. In fact, I walked into the White House kitchen that second year when I was able to add these things. And 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, great, let's get those eggs up right away. And everyone's looking at me, are you crazy? It takes, 12 minutes, whatever, to make a hard-boiled egg. And I'm like, no, these have to cook the entire day. And you saved the onion peels for me, right? And they were all like, this girl is crazy. So, but they were delicious. They are delicious. And if you're making a cholent or hamim, adafina, any of those overnight dishes in a crock pot, put in some eggs. Because that's how these hard-boiled eggs got their start. They're also called Shabbat eggs because they were cooked in the overnight dish. And then I was able to make Moroccan haroset balls and some other things that brought more of the, Jewish food is world cuisine. Jewish food is of like every corner in the world. It's one of the things I love about the Nosher is that you have stories about Jewish food from all over the world and throughout time. And I think that is so important because that is truly what Jewish food is. Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
I love that part about Jewish food too. So thank you. Thank you, Susan. And thank you for always continuing to educate me because I learn something new every time. Somebody is asking about canola oil. So maybe just,
I'm having trouble.
What say about the different oils you would mention.
Shannon, I don't know if it's just me or what, but you were in and out on that.
No, it was my internet for a second. So sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Oh. Okay. Talk about canola oil.
Well, canola oil is a blend, very often GMO. You can find non-GMO now. And honestly, I don't think the qualities of canola oil are all that healthy. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head for canola oil. It is a tasteless oil, that is true, but it has more of the harmful fats, and I'm trying to remember, and I'm not remembering, but it has more of the harmful fats in it, and especially when you fry with it. So that's there's so many other good oils that actually have healthy benefits for you. Like avocado oil, if you want a neutral salad dressing, oh my gosh, it's a lovely, lovely light oil, and it actually has health benefits. And so you really want to look for an oil that has health benefits. You can get it organic, you can get it non-NGO. I think that's pretty important. Or GM, not non-genetically modified, yeah.
So we had a couple of people actually just private message me asking about huevos haminados. So maybe you could share a little bit about those. I know that you know it's something that you probably have written about.
Sure.
And then we have another question about making the bimuelos gluten-free. Could I make them gluten-free by using a gluten-free farro bun? Rachel, I'll answer Susan's question. You might have missed this at the beginning, but Susan shared that you can she recommends using a 1-for-1 gluten-free mix, like the cup for cup. You can use that as a substitute in the flour for this recipe.
Right.
And if you were making it for Passover, would it also be would it be a straight 1 cup of matzah meal instead of 1 cup of flour?
No, I've never made this kind for Passover. I've always made the broken up matzah ones, or the matzah meal pancakes, or I've used matzah farfel and egg to create a bimuelo that's more like this, but I've never done this particular one. I'm gonna have to experiment with that, to be honest. Before these cool off, by the way, I want to put this is maple syrup. This is like one of the best things we could put on these this year with our almost Thanksgiving again. In what you get with Middle Eastern and Sephardic food, you know, if you're putting a syrup on a cake or baklava or something, you always have either hot food, cooled off room temperature syrup, or hot syrup and cooler food. It's better to put things, if you want it to soak in, to put this syrup on when the food is hot. So I just want to show you. I'm only going to do it with part of these. And it's so lovely and drippy. And you can warm the syrup and pass the bimuelos and let people have a choice and do what they want. And I'll show you some other choices. For instance, if you want, you can also sprinkle pomegranate seeds, or you could sprinkle, in this case, some pistachios that are really cut up. It's kind of a fun presentation too. You could sprinkle silver, sprinkles on there if you wanted to make them silver and blue sprinkles, make it Hanukkah for fun. But I love doing the nuts because I love the contrasting textures. Now, if you want to do powdered sugar, let me show you what those will look like, okay? So I just gently tap to make it snow. This is just a little fine strainer. And you can put as much or as little as you like. The other thing you can do is when they're hot, quickly roll them in regular sugar and cinnamon together. Mix the cinnamon and sugar together and roll them. If you're going to do the powdered sugar, I would do that right before you actually serve them because, whoops, a little extra there, because you know how powdered sugar tends to disappear. So that's 2 different ways you can do it, but there's many, many more. You can kind of see my preference. I just realized I have 2, 4, 6, 7 of them that are done with the maple syrup and 5 of them with the powdered sugar. So there is a problem with this though, which is it is Sunday at 8:30. And so far, none of my neighbors want any fried food at this hour. So I'm going to have to like put these in the fridge and, you know, hope that actually, I'm going to try freezing them. I haven't frozen them for a long time. Not so long, it'll be a week. But I'm going to try freezing them for a week and see what happens. I just generally don't freeze fried food except for latkes, which I freeze by putting on, and I'll do these the same way. I freeze them separated on a tray or a pan, you know, a baking tray in the freezer on some parchment. And then I put them in a container, a freezer container or a bag after they're totally frozen together. So that's what I'll have to do here. Let me just think if there's anything I'm forgetting here.
So we do have a couple of questions coming in, Susan, if I can start sending them to you.
Okay, let me just say, you can also do straight honey, by the way. A lot of people like to just do straight honey. So maple syrup honey. And
would
also,
you warm the honey or just straight up drizzled honey?
If this is warm, if the Bimuelos are warm, you don't have to. If the Bimuelos aren't really warm, like now they're starting to cool off, then I would warm the honey a little bit. You can also use date syrup the same way, which is a very interesting taste and very good with the pistachios and maybe some pomegranates too. All right.
You just answered two people's questions, so that's perfect. Someone was asking about Ceylon. Stephanie said, I just used agave nectar on mine, and I may or may not have eaten 2 of them. Good for you. I wish we lived closer, Susan. I would come over and eat some with a cup of tea right now.
Oh, that would be so nice. I wish.
Sharon wants to know, can you serve them with a jelly or jam dip?
Why not? It's not traditional, but why not? Sure. And in fact, if you're going to do that, you could serve them for breakfast. Okay. I mean, you know, what's important, I think, is that we make the foods, that we understand what we're making, we know where it comes from, and we enjoy it. We make it, we share it. So, and putting our own spin on it is a wonderful thing. I never thought about doing with a jelly or a jam. That would make a fun Hanukkah brunch. That's one of the foods. Anyway, so yes, do whatever you want in that respect.
We have just a few minutes, so I just want to give everybody a last opportunity to ask any questions. Susan, this was so great. I really appreciated all of the history of how Bimuelos traveled, and I love hearing about how, you know, these Jewish foods influenced everywhere that they went. So thank you for doing that.
I had written a story in Lilith magazine called "When Food Betrayed the Jews." I sent you the link, but it was
I'm going to share it right now. I'm going to share it right now.
Thank you. It's a story if people want to know more about the food of the Sephardim in Spain and what happened when they left Spain, and also how food truly, we know about the food of the Jews of Spain, mostly because of Inquisition testimony, and then what they brought with them to other places. But food is all over Inquisition testimony. It's unbelievable.
Shelley wants to know, if she eliminated the pumpkin, what would she substitute it with? But there are regular, simple Bimuelos recipes, right?
Yeah, there are. You know, you could put in an extra egg. You could, because you need the moisture. You could put some milk, probably, I'd say maybe half a cup of milk. I'm thinking I wonder, and I haven't tried this, but I just thought of this. What if you did apple cider?
Ooh.
That might be interesting taste.
Or maybe applesauce even.
Yeah, you could definitely do applesauce like on a 1-for-1. That's a good idea. On a 1-for-1 with the pumpkin. And make like, you know, like the applesauce spice cake idea that is so Jewish. I have a recipe that my mother made when I was a kid. Oh. And I think, you know, so many other people's mothers made. You would kind of hearken to that a little bit. That would be so lovely.
This was so great. Thank you, everybody who joined us tonight. Susan, thank you.
I have one more thing. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I have to teach everyone how to say Happy Hanukkah in Ladino. It's very easy. Hanukkah Alegre. Happy Hanukkah, Hanukkah Alegre.